EWS racers set their bikes up to gain every second they can on the world's toughest tracks. So if their setup is so good, surely it'll help us go faster on our own tracks too, right? Not necessarily. So here's some common themes we've seen in the EWS and why you shouldn't set up your bike like a pro. In the last year or two, the most common theme I've noticed is 760mm handlebars. That's right, almost every rider from 5'1" Isabelle Couturier to the 6'1" rider Jack Moyer is running 760mm bars. In fact, most riders are using this width in the EWS, regardless of their height or their shoulder width. Isabelle, Jack, Cecile Ravenel, Kevin Mikel, Matt Walker, the list goes on. Even Richie Rude is using a close 755mm and Jesse Melamide is using 740. So is this the magic number for speed? Not exactly. Jack says he actually prefers to run wider bars than this at home, and he usually does, but in the EWS he chooses 760 because he can get through often tight and awkward tracks on the EWS. Even Damon Otten, he usually uses 770mm bars, but he'll go down to 750 on courses like Finale Ligure. And these guys are basically just tree dodging and upping their handling accuracy. The problem for us normal riders is that if you're riding flowy open trails or bike parks, too narrow isn't going to feel great. It might even feel a bit twitchy or a little less confidence inspiring because you'll have a less stable position. So don't follow your EWS idol on this one. Choose what's right for you and your stance and your riding style. The EWS pros are riding technical tracks that are often extremely rocky, and sometimes those tracks aren't even designed for bikes to go down them in the first place. Plus, they are riding them as hard as they possibly can, and probably way harder than any of us. And don't forget, they're also riding these tracks semi-blind, so they need to be prepared for any surprises on the trail along the way. And they absolutely don't want a puncture. That's one way to kill a race season. That's why many pros these days are racing on downhill and enduro casing tyres. Their super thick sidewalls will help them reduce the risk of puncture. So, well, this sounds great, and why shouldn't we copy this? But we don't want to punch either, but usually outside of a race, we've got time to fix one. And all that extra rubber means extra weight and extra drag, so heavier tyres basically means harder work. Now don't get me wrong, I love a downhill and enduro casing tyre on holiday, and even when I'm going to rocky bike parks. But on my own dirt trails, they can be pretty exhausting, and I'm more than happy with a normal trail tyre. So basically, go easy on yourself unless you really have to. Jack Moyer won the 2021 EWS Series aboard some whopping 220mm disc rotors. Now, 200mm is pretty common on big travel bikes these days, but 220 disc is usually reserved for the weight and the extra speed of an e-bike. So big rotors obviously mean more power, but they also offer better heat dissipation because they're bigger, which means more consistent braking on long descents. Now, most pros running these 220mm discs don't exactly need the extra stopping power as such, but more power means less time braking, so they can save precious strength in the arms and the hands by braking for less time. They also race stages that can be up to 10 minutes long, so brakes that don't heat up and fade over time is pretty crucial for them. But as Doddy found out in Malaga recently, 220mm rotors are so powerful they can actually feel a little bit too much. For the average rider, braking with big rotors can feel a bit like flicking a light switch on and off. And that's not ideal for riding a bike smoothly. So the EWS pros, they'll train day in and day out to be good riders. And they work on hand strength and arm strength, and they're basically finely tuned machines when it comes to knowing how much to brake and when to brake. Unlike me, who loves a bit of a panic brake every now and then. So while the pros are experts in modulating powerful brakes, the reality is that most of us would get on better with a system that's a tad gentler in the first place. So, conclusion, maybe bigger isn't always better. So when EWS first started out, everyone was on these big loops with big old backpacks and full face helmets strapped to the backs on their climbs. These days, most of the pros look to be in nothing but a shorts and jersey with one water bottle on their bike. It's certainly easier nowadays to carry tools and spares on the bike, and some bikes even allow you to store it inside the bike. But I can assure you that one water bottle isn't enough. Especially if it's hot, dehydration will suck the energy out of you and at worst could land you in A&E. The pros aren't just winging it though, I can assure you. They're not allowed assistance on EWS, but they are allowed to stop for food and water along the way. And places like the Alps often have water fountains dotted around the mountains for refills anyway. Now, while I love racing like this with minimal kit, I do only do this when I know that you can access water from shops and fountains along the way. I would never venture into the hills without adequate water and food to keep me safe. Even the great Jack Moyer, who completes a lap quicker than anyone else, has raced EWS with a backpack when he needed to gain extra water, when he knew that stages and liaisons would be long and hot. So be more Jack and carry more water when you need to. Another EWS trend that I'm hearing about is soft suspension. So Isabel told GMBN that she runs the lightest possible spring on her coil rear shock because she likes her wheels to track the ground. And Jack Moyer also runs his suspension softer than when he rides his bike and trails at home. He says this is because he finds it more forgiving for unexpected hits on tracks that he doesn't know so well. So soft suspension or less compression damping, that sounds like a great idea for us normal riders. Sure, but if you set very little compression in your forks, it will take the hits nicely, but it may also feel a bit wallowy, and especially in pedally sections. It may even feel vague in the corners, and if you're not a particularly confident technical descender, you might find that your bike actually dives and bobs when you hit on the brakes. So not necessarily ideal, and I would try experimenting first. In conclusion, as much as I like to think that I can ride like a pro, that is very far from the truth, I'll tell you. These guys train and recover 24/7. They are not like you and I with our 9-to-5 jobs. And it should be a given that even if we had trails like the EWS stages on our doorstep, we're unlikely to be riding them like the pros. So let's not copy their setup just yet. But what do you think? Have you tried a pro setup? Has it helped you or hindered you? Let us know down in the comments below and let's start up a debate. Thanks for watching.